And so, having had our opening centering, I will waste no time in introducing the man of the hour. I know that is what everyone is here to engage. And I just really want to take just a moment to say that Reverend Jesse and I are recognizing that we have known each other for 38 years. And the interesting thing about that is that when I was thinking about what exactly I would say within about a minute and a half to introduce this man who is just about one of the most important persons that ever came into my life, I realized that I counted up that 38 years. And then I asked him today, I said, you want to send me anything that you want me to say in your introduction? Because I don't want to miss anything that you would want me to say. And he said, well, I've been in ministry for 38 years. And so we met when Creative Life did exist, but it was a single little 2-story building in the middle of miles and miles of farmland. And when he started, he was just beginning. And when I was started, I was literally wet behind the ears. I barely knew that this teaching existed the first time I ever walked into Creative Life. And I was thinking about how profoundly important that was. It was the most important demonstration of my life, literally. And it was the fulfillment of a dream that I didn't even know that I had. And at every juncture of the most important dreams of my life, Jesse has popped in. Reverend Jesse, my apologies.
Just
Jesse. So yes, at these important junctures, when I got married, Jesse popped in. And when I started the study group in Louisville, Jesse popped in and came and did a workshop for us, actually, when we chartered as a church. And here he is today, on just at the very beginning of my being licensed in ministry. And it's just a beautiful thing. So what I want to tell you about him is that his ministry is 38 years young, and he has been in the same location, and he took that one little 2-story building and expanded into a campus with the help of all kinds of angels and lights on this planet. But it's just a marvelous thing to see how Creative Life Spiritual Center has blossomed into an entire ministry. And since that time, he's written 2 books. Anybody who knows anything about the Essential Ernest Holmes knows that he created that on request. He gleaned out all the pearls from Ernest and gave us the Essential Ernest. And I want to give you credit for creating that class too. Didn't you create the class for that too, Jesse?
Yes.
So, and then now he's got his newest book, which is, I have it here somewhere. What's the name of your new book, Jesse?
More Than We Seem.
More Than We Seem, which came out this year, and I haven't read yet. Clearly, you can tell, because if I had, I would be able to say the name of it. He is also, I did not know this, he is a part of the Ministry of History faculty in 4 of our spiritual School of Spiritual Leadership campuses. And I did not know that. And I just think that that's fabulous, which I presume has to do with the archives.
Well, I teach 2 courses. I teach Historical Foundations of New Thought and the Teachings and Writings of Ernest Holmes. And I was sad you weren't one of my students, so I didn't get to make your life difficult.
Oh, I wish I would have known. Oh my God.
Florida hasn't called me yet, so.
Well, that might be something Florida puts on their list.
Well, that might be. We'll see how tonight goes.
Without further ado, I give you Reverend Dr. Jesse Jennings, my mentor and my friend, and so glad for you all to get to know him.
Thank you so much, Almost Reverend Vicky. That's your official title, Almost Reverend Vicky. Well, good evening, everyone. And I'm here tonight at Vicky's invitation, also Pat Ferguson's invitation. Pat and Tammy and Beverly and somebody, Maruk, have all been students with me in either a book study on More Than We Seem, or especially as pertains to tonight, the Essential Ernest Holmes, the CSL course. the intermediate level course. And in that course, we have a structure because there's so much material, there's way too much material. It's overwritten, badly overwritten, and I'm working on that. They said write it for a 2-person room, you know, so there's study questions, all this. Well, there's a structure, a through line to the course to keep referring back to, which is called the Declaration of Principles. And so we had a discussion about that one night in that aforementioned course, and that led to me being with you tonight. So we're going to go through the Declaration of Principles. And after a little prelim, I'm going to share screen and get out of the way so you can actually see the document. I don't expect you to have it in front of you. And we'll go through it line by line. And I'll share with you some interpretation that I have on it, some comments that other people have made. And then I'd like to hear from you, your thoughts too. And I'd ask you this, and you probably know this from being on Zoom, but if you wish to speak, raise your virtual hand down at the bottom where it says, on mine, it says raise hand. Sometimes it says, I think, reactions. If you raise your little virtual hand, it'll move you to the upper left of my screen, and I'll know that you're waiting to speak. If you sit and wave at the camera, I might not know that. Okay, so without further delay, what we believe. In or around 1927, somebody wrote to Ernest Holmes and they said, can you give me a succinct outline as to your philosophical standpoint? And he did. He sat down and he wrote up by longhand what I believe. And then he tweaked it, and he tweaked it some more, and then he sent it off to this person. And they liked it, and they shared it, and he told some other people he'd done it. And they said, well, why don't you write it up as what the group believes, so that we have sort of a unified statement of intention going forward in the science mind. So he did. Now it's been tweaked over the years. It's been rendered gender neutral, and it's been massaged a little bit, but it's basically the same document that he came up with. And even with the tweaking and all of that, it's still controversial because, well, you'll see why. For one thing, it's controversial because it looks like a creed. You know, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, well, it looks like a creed. And I had somebody take me to task recently about this, to my magazine column. They said, that thing is a creed. And rather than deny it and back away from it or change the definition of creed, I said, yes, it is. However, it's not enforced. And I went with that, you see, because I was raised with the Nicene Creed. In less formal settings, we recited the Apostles' Creed, which is a shorter version of the Nicene Creed. And I went to a funeral a few years ago before the pandemic, and it was in an Anglican, in an Episcopal church. And I grew up in the Episcopal church in New York. And they had everybody kind of without warning stand up and recite this creed, which most people could do because they were Episcopalians. Well, I started to stand up because I had the old Episcopal, thing going. And then I thought, no, I no longer believe the words in this creed, so I'm going to stay seated. And I looked across the room, and there was a friend of mine who's a conservative Jew, and he too was seated. So we kind of made eye contact about that. And I don't know what everybody else in the room thought, but I'm of an age now where I'm not going to get up and say a bunch of stuff I don't believe just to fit in, Well, religious scientists generally kind of mavericks. That's why we're here. We didn't really find a home in mainstream organized religion, did we? So when you pass a creed by us, there's this little alarm kind of goes. I'm not sure, but nobody I know in this teaching has ever been hauled in front of an authority and said, we're not sure you believe line 6. This is not enforced. It's a statement of general direction. Got to believe something. Try this on for size. So as we go through it, there may be things. I have some issues with it. You may have some issues with it. And yet it's a very powerful document. All right, let's start out here. I'm going to share screen now. Just a moment. Let's see, what would you like to look at? There we go. Everybody see this all right? If you need to, you can minimize your panes on which are on your right of the if you have gallery view on, you can minimize that if it gets in the way of the words. We believe in God, the living spirit almighty, one indestructible, absolute and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. The only part of that that like may be familiar to the newcomer is we believe in God. The living spirit almighty, one indestructible, absolute and self-existent cause. What in the world does that mean? Well, to me, it means there was nothing before it, there's nothing after it, it's absolute, and everything else is relative. And it's indestructible because there's nothing that could destroy it because nothing else exists. In other words, we get to the matter of infinitude here, which is a big ask for us because you can't wrap your mind around an infinite concept. And I just got through talking about this on the first Sunday of the month when we do the basic series in most of our centers, about how our definition of deity is so strange and wonderful. We believe that God is all there is, not most of what is, not the most powerful thing of what is, but all that is, including all of the aspects of creation that don't seem godly. It contains absolutely everything. It is a unitary teaching. A term the ancients had for this was the monad, M-O-N-A-D, the one unit from which all subsequent units derive. All one, all one. Now that's easier to imagine, not possible really, but easier, I suppose, to imagine at the physical level than it is at the mental or emotional level, you see. Because I can look outside and I can say, well, the tree is one with the ground, and the ground is one with the core of the earth, and the earth is one with the solar system, and all the rest of this. I can wrap my mind around that. But all time being one is harder to imagine. All feelings being one, all intentions being one, all purposes and all motivations and all ambitions being one. And sometimes the student of metaphysics will say, well, I think that God is good. God is the good. God is the great, eternal, and everlasting good. And you ask me, say, well, what do you consider not good? And they'll name a few things. And you say, well, if those don't exist in God, where do they exist? Well, God would have no dealings with any of that kind of thing. Well, then there's something outside of God. Then all of a sudden your God's a little bit limited. You have a good, moral, upstanding, kind of God. But all this other stuff is, well, where is it? It all has to exist within the one. And the positive benefit to our thinking that is it makes everything healable, makes everything treat worthy. If some things existed outside of what God is, there'd be nothing we could do about them but hope. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, okay, but is not absorbed by its creation. What does that mean? Well, because it's infinite, it's not all sucked up at one point within itself the way you and I are. Our attention, like I'm paying attention right now to what I'm doing. And you're paying attention to what you're doing, and you're not paying attention to the stuff you're not paying attention to. So it's not intruding. You're absorbed in this for the moment. But something could distract you. Something could pull you in a different direction. And most days we multitask. Most days we've got a million things going on. We've got 30, I read 30 or 40,000. This number changes every time I give it, but I think 30 or 40,000 thoughts run through the average human mind in the course of the day, okay? This one is not absorbed by its creation. It's not like you or me, where we get busy and we can't deal with this other thing right now until we finish the thing we're on. So the idea of like God receiving requests from people and Jim Carrey riffed on this in a movie, about it's God's day off, and he has all these prayers coming up on a Sunday. It's not, this one is never incapable of managing its own business through us, because it is not only all form, but all energy. It's all potential. Everything that exists is in this one, as well as everything that's in potential, besides form. So everything that is in the one, and everything that is not is in the one. Does that make sense? That's kind of Zen-like, but you get the idea? Everything that could be. So right now, tonight, as we sit here, somebody's inventing something. You can be sure of it. Somebody's creating a musical piece or a work of art. A baby's being born. Something new is happening all the time that wasn't here before, at least in that form. Somebody's recombining something, which is what music basically is out of existing notes and creating art out of existing colors. So this one is not absorbed by its creation. It's not spread thin at the edges. Because I can't see all of you sharing screen, it's going to be especially important. If you don't get my attention with the little raised hand, then shout out, okay, if you want me to stop and discuss something. Until and unless you do that, I'm just going to forge ahead on. So we're sure to get through the document, and then, you know, if any business is left over at the end, we can discuss it there. That's all right with you too. Okay. Next point, the manifest universe is the body of God. Now, what's interesting, anybody notice what's interesting about this particular passage? It's the only one that doesn't begin with "we believe." He's not stating this as a matter of opinion, as a matter of belief. He's stating this as an absolute by God reality. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. Then he says, we believe in the incarnation of the Spirit in all people, and that all people are incarnations of the one Spirit. Okay, let's go back a moment. The manifest universe is the body of God. Holmes makes the point in several of his writings that he feels that God, the deity, whatever name you have, by the way, for the deity is perfectly acceptable. I often think of it as the goddess, too, for reasons of other spiritual paths that I kind of milled into my science mind work.
So Jesse,
yes,
I'm just going to take a little pause there. Vernon just wanted you to know he can see the hands and he will let you know.
Oh, perfect.
So
okay.
Yeah, you guys can signal and Vernon will see you. So either raise the electronic hand or do what you can, and Vernon will let you know.
Awesome, because I've just got 5 of you like a film strip over here on the side. Okay.
No worries.
So Holmes made the point several places in his writing that God is not fulfilled without expression. Right? That God would be lonely. He's anthropomorphizing here for a minute. He didn't do that a lot, but he did it some, and it's kind of poetic, you know. But he said God would be lonely and unfulfilled were there not a physical creation, the same as you or I would be if we had a great idea for something and never implemented it. Right? How sad. I have a poem that keeps running through my mind, but I've never written it down, and I perhaps never will. You know, well, that's not. It's sad for me, and it's also not the fulfillment of the destiny of the poem, if that makes sense to you. So there needs to be a manifest universe, so that the one back of all creation is sort of thinking all of this stuff up. Particularly for our purposes, the stuff that pre-existed us here. So like I was born onto this earth and there were already trees here. Okay. I was born onto this earth into a body that I didn't personally design. My species has a form. We're not identical, but we look more like each other than we don't, right? And so, you know, there were lots of things going on. In fact, Bob, Gail, you get a kick out of this, but Catherine McDowell used to have a crawl. You remember the old computers where you could write a crawl that was your screensaver, and she had on there to remind herself at work when she worked for you, Bob. She said a lot was accomplished before I was born. And she came in every morning to look at that on her computer. A lot was accomplished before I was born. Well, a lot was accomplished before any of us got here that we had, really nothing to do with beyond managing our experience of it, which I'll get to in a minute. So something higher than my intellect, than my participation in my own life, designed this earth, gave it an atmosphere, gave it water and sunlight, everything else that goes along with it, okay? And created a form of a body for me that contains a neural network that's complex enough to host reflective self-consciousness, where I can sit here and think about things and think about thinking about things. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. So God, or the all, hovers throughout creation, thinking stuff up, and then logically and necessarily that stuff manifests as some form. It incarnates this spirit, and he uses the word God and spirit interchangeably. He has a million different synonyms for God, as you know from reading him. Okay, the one mind, the universal intelligence, on and on and on. We believe in the incarnation of the spirit in all people, and that all people are incarnations of the one spirit. And I had somebody one time, they brought up, well, what about animals? Well, absolutely. We believe in the incarnation of the spirit. You might as well say in all living things. You also might as well say all inanimate things. You might as well say everything. But he mentions people in here. And the best reason I can think of why he does is he's writing this for people to read. So he keeps the subject on people. We believe in the incarnation of the spirit in all people, and all people are incarnations of the one spirit. Why would he emphasize that about people and not just say living things or all life everywhere? And I think it's because it's a reaction to spiritual teachings that do not believe in the incarnation of the spirit in all people, just in some people, just in the right people, just in the believing people, the belonging people, and so on. And this is one thing that I love about this, one of the many things I love about this teaching, and it's kept me interested and kept me involved in it all these years, is that we really do stand for that. All people belong. You don't have to earn your way in. There's not this sin forgiveness dynamic that goes on with the all. There's sin as, an act of stupidity or ignorance or self-harm or something that has its own reaction. As he said, we don't believe in reward and punishment. We believe in cause and effect, that we suffer by our failings and so on. And all people are incarnations of the one spirit. So this one spirit exists at the heart of every person, including the people we don't like. Okay, do you have anybody in your life you don't like? Do you have anybody in your life you don't trust? Do you have anybody in your life you just don't want to be around them? Well, the one spirit's at the center of them. And if you don't have anybody like that in your personal life, you may read the news and you think, well, I don't like this. I don't like what I'm reading here, Well, we did an exercise at my center last year over the summer. I said, let's try this. Okay. From here on, because it kind of hit me around June. I don't know why. And I said, for the rest of the year, let's have a spiritual practice together where we treat to know who we are, and we treat to know that everybody else knows who they are. Okay. So where I'm treating to know who I am, and that means my motives, my intentions, my ambitions, digging down deep into the psyche, and we treat to know that everybody else knows who they are, because when everybody else knows who they are, we can reasonably expect they're going to behave better. And I say that because I've never met a person who, increasing their self-awareness, behaved worse. There might have been an imperceptible change for a while anyway, but nobody has ever gone off the rails by knowing more of who they are. So this is what we're knowing here. We believe in the incarnation of spirit in all people. All people contain the divine spark within them. All right. Go on to number 4. We believe, now this, right, this one throws some people a curve. I got to warn you. We believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul forever and ever expanding. Isn't that nice? And I've had people say, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in eternal life. I think when I die here, the lights go out. I go poof, I'm gone. That's it. End of story. Or they'll say, I believe that I go on, but not necessarily as an individual soul. Well, the good news is you can believe anything you want about this, and it's perfectly fine. And nobody's going to stop you. No, nobody's going to say, you there, are you really on board with this continuity thing? No, believe whatever you like. Holmes's position, and I just offer it as well as his position and as a logical extension really of what he's told us so far. His position was that the individual soul continues in what he called an upward spiral, an upward spiral. That is, we go on learning more, building on what we've got here. And when I say that, somebody is bound to say, aha, but wait, I don't remember building on what came before this. I got here as a blank slate. Everything I know, I've learned on the fly in this life. Well, I don't have an answer for you there. But if we believe in the eternality of life, you got to understand it works in both directions. It actually works in every direction, because it's like you can divide a point by an infinite number of lines. A line is an infinite number of points, and it completely blows your mind if you look at the geometry of the thing. But there's a school of thought. This is a little off the point, but I want to put it out there to you because I want to encourage everybody always to read Emerson. You know, and Emerson had I can't quote it exactly as he put it, but the gist of the thing was he said there are two shores on either side of this island called life. Okay? Two rivers, you know, two shores. And he says the far side of this life, when we leave this life, is the river Styx, Styx. And you've heard of the river Styx and the boatman on the river Styx who carries us on into the next experience. But less known is the river on the near side of this life, which is the river Lethe, Lethe. This comes from Greek mythology, the river Lethe. And Lethe means forgetfulness. And he said, just as Achilles, his heel, his mother, can't think of her name right now, held his heel, dipped him in the water of immortality, and because she was holding his heel, it didn't get wet, and hence Achilles' heel. You know, he says, well, Emerson says, well, as we step in the boat to cross the river from where we were before this life to come into this life, he said, all of us kind of miss a step and touch for a moment the water of the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, and it rinses away all memory of what was before. There are exceptions to this that we know of, that we've heard of, where people remember things, know things they shouldn't know. There's the prodigies and so forth. But the gist of the deal is that Holmes believed that we made a decision of some kind in this life to kind of hit the floor running and pick it all up as we go and so on, and that we do build on that as we go. Now, that's a very comforting thought, isn't it? And the people who argue about it, say they don't believe that, are not happy not believing it. They'll tell you that. You know, it's not a joyful thing to think the lights just go out or that we start completely over. One of you was saying before we were admiring each other's books, you know, as we were setting up tonight, you know, I want these puppies to go with me. Well, okay, that's not going to happen. I realize, you know, if I were an Egyptian, I'd be buried with them, but I mean, an ancient one. But as much of this stuff as I can consume behind me is going with me. I am convinced of it. We believe that heaven is within us and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. Okay? It's within us. It's not a physical destination elsewhere. You know why? There is no elsewhere. He could have brought up hell. He didn't want to. I'm kind of glad he didn't, because it's kind of a downer. But heaven, hell, or any kind of state of being like that is a state of consciousness. And this isn't high philosophy. I mean, we know this because we can be in neutral space and feel heavenly about it. We can be in neutral space and feel hellish about it, right? You can sit there and dream of wonderful things that you want to do or be or have in your life, and your imagination is swept away with it. And there's a metabolic response throughout the physical self, and you can do the same in the other direction and sit there and worry about things and fret and stew and so on, and there's a metabolic response. And it's amazing how this works, but it does. And one of the great teachers of science of mind of Ernest's generation and Ernest's instruction was Dr. Raymond Charles Barker, who my family actually studied with in New York at Lincoln Center and on 48th Street. But he had a saying. He said, if you've been this, I love this, if you've been a good worrier, you'll make a great treater. If you've been a good worrier, you'll make a great treater. Why? Because you're using the same dynamic. You're just giving it different front end information. I mean, think about it. When you worry, that's a spiritual practice. You sit down, you stop what you're doing, or you keep doing what you're doing, and you're distracted into worry, and you sit there and you worry and you turn it over. And if you haven't worried enough, you worry some more. And then you're worried you haven't worried enough and you're missing something, and you get the picture, and you lay awake nights, and then you worry about not getting enough sleep, and the worries pile up and so on. Well, treatment is you sit down and you develop a spiritual practice of what could go right in my life today, what could go beautifully and wonderfully in my dreams and hopes and goals and so on. And it uses the same dynamic, the same law. It uses the same intensity of feeling. It's just the feeling is shaded differently. See, it's not what Holmes would call morbid thinking. It's instead like lucid dreaming. It's elevated thinking. We believe, and we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it, which is part of our spiritual practice. So we look around and we say, yeah, this is nice. I like it here. This is great. Into every life, a little rain must fall. And unless you're in California right now, that's a beautiful thing. And so we're treating about California and the Californians there, but you look at the rain. I mean, I was reading something about it. It said day 1, they're like, great, the trout's broken. Day 5, it's like enough already. And I could totally relate to that because I live in Gulf Coast, Texas now. And that's, we get that kind of thing too. But you look for, life hands you a lemon, you make lemonade. That's not a bad way to approach life. You say, okay, what can I do with this? What can I do with this to improve the quality of my life? And you count your blessings and you live in a state of gratitude. All of that is becoming conscious of the presence of heaven and your place in it. We believe in the goal of life to be a complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and this goal is sure to be attained by all. I'm not sure who all is on this call tonight. If somebody I invited has joined us since I started rolling through this, but I know people have an issue with this because it comes up all day. Just wait a minute. All discord of every nature. He's being very absolute here. The ultimate goal of all life to be a complete emancipation. Not only that, but that this goal is sure to be attained by all. 2 more absolute statements: is sure to be attained. He doesn't say it's likely to be attained, it stands 50-50 chance. And he doesn't say it's sure to be attained by most people or the people who agree with me or any of the rest of that. It's all discord, every nature, sure to be attained by all. I'm not sure I agree with that. Frankly, I like a little discord. And by discord, I don't mean conflict, gunplay, out and out hostility. I mean a little tension, a little dynamic. I mean, one example I can give you, I put out a couple of books. They were hard to write. I have to write a magazine column every month. It's hard to write. It's hard to write. And I have a lot of words in my head, but it's really hard to write, to sit down because you want to say it the right way and all. That's Discord. Also, most stuff in my life, virtually all of it professionally, is due on deadline. Isn't most of what you got going on in your life due on deadline? Okay. Your kids need to go to soccer practice, and soccer practice doesn't start when they get there. So you gotta drop what you're doing and do this and do that, and then the dryer buzzes and the clothes are getting wrinkled, and we run from place to place doing all of that's discord. You know what the opposite of discord is? Concord. And if you think of it musically, if all you had was concord, it would be really boring music. You need a resolution. It's why you have sevenths and ninths and, you know, strange sorts of chord structures and things that then resolve into a whole key, minor or major. And it's pleasing to the ear. And if the thing doesn't resolve, you're kind of left hanging. So, yeah. And I even think that in the next life and in the world to come and the world beyond that and the world beyond that and wherever we wind up a gazillion dimensions from here, that I'm still going to want a little challenge, a little kind of go get it if you want it sort of energy. What are your thoughts on this? Does this throw you a curve too? Or have I just made your life more complicated by bringing all that up?
Jesse,
Yes.
Vernon is asking, Vernon says, please give an example of what concord is. I came up with concordance, but I think a good example, living example of concord would be good.
Well, to put it another way, musically, it's like harmony. Everything is working together. Everybody's playing their part. Every energy is equally represented. Everything is in full bloom. In fact, there's another metaphor for you, you know? We're in winter in this hemisphere right now. Stuff looks dead. Then spring will come, things will bud and so forth. Then they'll hit, in summer, they'll hit a peak of maturity, won't they? Plants and so forth. And then they'll begin to decline again with the fall. Well, what if we could keep everything at high summer all the time? You see, and we say, well, this is every plant, every tree, and everything expressing its full potential 100% of the time. That would be not only kind of weird and unnatural for us, we'd have to get used to it, but it would also not represent the fullness really of what everything is, which expresses itself in its apparent dying stages and its apparent, and the push that it makes to break the seed casing, to push through the soil, which is what causes each little shoot, you know, to grow strong. Like when the baby chick breaks out of the, you've heard this, I know a lot, but when the baby chick kicks its way out of its egg, it's building strength it will need. When the caterpillar and so on out of the chrysalis, concord is full on delivery of the mature response of the self, but it takes getting there. I'll give you an example of this discord to concord. There's a guy named Brian who plays the guitar at our center. Wonderful guy. He's very involved in our center, but if you know him because he plays the guitar very often on Sunday, and he's hugely tall. He's like 6'5", you know, and he's really good. And I've watched him. He's been around for some years now, and I've watched him get better because he practices on the guitar all the time. Well, he went to visit his daughter out of town. We had an event coming up. He went to visit his daughter, and I got a text from him the night before the event. He says, "My God, I came back to town. I left my guitar at her house. What am I going to do?" He says, "Do you have a guitar I can borrow?" He says, "I need an acoustic guitar. Do you have an acoustic guitar I can borrow?" I was told you do. I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "It's a very old guitar. I don't use it much. It's a practice guitar. And because I don't use it much, it's kind of in the state I got it in, which is it has a very high action, which means the strings are very far off of the neck. and the frets, you know. And so I'll get it to you. So I got it to him. And the next day he handed it back to me and he says, I found another guitar. He says, this is so hard to play. He says, my fingers are bleeding. And this is a guy who plays all the time and he has calluses and stuff, you know, and his fingers were bleeding. And it put him in, why I'm telling you this is it put him in mind of when he was first learning to play the guitar, because the first thing that every guitarist has to do, I don't care who they are, is realize their fingers are going to bleed. Their fingers are going to hurt like hell learning to play the guitar. And that's the price you pay to play the guitar. It's just what it is. And they tell you that there's something about that had they been able to just pick the thing up and play it, they wouldn't have discovered about themselves. So that's some of the discord to concord thing. Yeah, Pat.
I understand, I think, what Ernest was going with here when he said all discord of every nature would be gone and that kind of thing. But I think if we take it too literally, we're kind of looking at the death of anticipation.
Yeah.
And that would be losing something. So we have to kind of level that out in our mind, what that actually means to each one of us.
Well put. Thank you. Yeah, well put. For one thing, we wouldn't have opera, would we? Because it's all about discord. Okay, how we doing on time here? All right, we got 14 minutes left and about, whoa, look at this. I better whip along here. We believe in the unity of all life and that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. Well, that's not radically different than what we've read before, where he said, you know, that all people are incarnations of the one spirit. So all life is one and the highest innermost is one. So that which I worship as though it were outside of me and that which I explore as the essence of my being is one dynamic reality. We believe that God is personal to all who feel his indwelling presence. Now that's a great question, or a great, well, statement. A question gotten over the years from people is focus so much on law, on a principle that delivers based on the power of our word. Where did my personal Jesus go? Where did my angels go? Where did my Brahma go? Where are my bodhisattvas? You know, if it's all just this crisp management, of course, bodhisattvas are earthly, but they're incarnations of spirit, of life beyond. It's a divine spirit that's liberated itself from the wheel of Dharma. But so like I need something, like I'm in pain, like I'm confused. What's going to comfort me if all I'm dealing with is a law? And he says, it's personal to all who feel it, to all who feel it. What this teaching does is it widens the net, really. And instead of just saying that God in heaven is going to look down on you and take pity and send relief, a human will, your neighbor will, or your cat will, or watching the moon rise will, or something will, if you're willing to feel this indwelling presence. And you'll get messages about your own worthiness, your value as a being from thin air. When you feel this indwelling presence, when you feel that it's already here. I think Vicky and the other Pat and the other ministers and practitioners who are in the group tonight would agree that the hardest thing people have to do is convince themselves that they're really worthy. It's not about what God thinks or, you know, the theology of the thing. It's about like me being who I am with my past, you know, am I really worthy? Can I really do this? And he's saying, if you'll feel this indwelling presence, it will just love on you and it will send you support. It will send you relief and ideas, and comfort, and also discord. It'll send you assignments. It'll send you, okay, you want to work through this? Here's where you need to look. And that's something we very often say in this teaching is, so we don't have all the answers, but we know where to look. You look within the self. We believe, which leads to this next one, we believe in the direct revelation of truth through the intuitive and spiritual nature of each person, and that anyone may become a revealer of truth who lives in close contact with the indwelling God. The direct revelation of truth. We go to spirit without mediation. We have no intermediaries. Ministers and practitioners are not intermediaries. We don't go to them and say, would you please ask me for, ask God for this and this for me? And we say, all right, I'll get back to you. I'm going to fire off an email or something. But there's nothing standing between us. If you have saints and sages and elementals and all around you, they're beautiful, wonderful things. And they're not standing between you and the source of your own being. They're standing alongside you as parallel support, much the same as other humans do. So the direct revelation of truth puts it back, serves the ball back into your court. What do you believe? How do you feel about things? The intuitive could take an hour of its own, because intuitive, as Holmes puts it, is different than psychic. His psychic is contained within it. It's another level of information, but intuition means the recognition of the oneness of all things. That's the teaching that comes from within. It's not where you left your car keys and that kind of stuff. That's a psychic conjure. It's just plain memory, But the intuitive and spiritual nature of each person is communicating to you the truth of your own being. And anyone may become a revealer of truth who lives in close contact with the indwelling God. And you could reword that and say everyone is already a revealer of truth. It's their truth. And if it's absolute truth, there's very little of that to go around, because really the absolute truth is simply I am. But a revealer of truth, maybe for the purposes of other people, like, vending information to them. You'll want somebody who lives in close contact with the indwelling God, by which I mean this. Going back to Emerson for a moment, Emerson said, the faith which stands on authority is not faith. Think about that a moment. The faith which stands on authority is not faith. What is it? It's authority. It's repetition of authority. So if you want to reveal truth in the sense of metaphysical truth, you're going to want to live in close contact with your indwelling God, not what somebody else says about their indwelling God, including Ernest Holmes, Emerson, or whoever else you like. Okay? They offer clues and glimpses and sound bites and all the rest of this, but you have to. This is the thing I jump up and down about, is if you want to really live this work, you got to develop a daily spiritual practice. It's not enough to just sit through courses and close the book and say, well, now I know it. It's not algebra. I had to learn algebra. I've never had to use, I don't think I've ever had to use algebra my entire life. And I'm 67 years old, never had to use it because I didn't go into engineering or physics or something like that. But I learned it. And if you force me to, I could probably regurgitate some of it. Well, it's not like that, this form of information. It's dynamic, and it requires what's called in 12-step work, the regular, the maintenance, how is it called? The daily maintenance of your spiritual condition. Daily maintenance of your spiritual condition. Okay. We believe that the universal spirit, which is God, operates through a universal mind, which is the law of God. Okay, so far so good. We are surrounded by this creative mind, which receives the direct impress of our thought and acts upon it. Wow, you've heard that quoted a lot, doesn't it? It receives the direct impress of our thoughts, particularly the thoughts that are wrapped in feeling. Otherwise, those 30 to 40,000 thoughts that we have in a day would all manifest, which they don't. And we get sick to our stomachs because we'd be in this kaleidoscopic kind of reality, Instead, it's this stuff that we wrap in feeling that becomes an intention. And that's what the law, the creative mind, really acts on and brings to pass. So we want to choose our thoughts, and especially we want to choose which thoughts we get worked up about, which ones we get excited about, which goes back to the business of worry. you know, that we can worry a thing into being. Remember what Job said? The thing I have feared the most, that which I have feared the most has come upon me. That which I have feared the most has come upon me. See, we can do that to ourselves, not to alarm anybody. But there is a power for good in the universe, and it's not the same thing as God being only good. The power for good is the power of something that works. And to boil it down and make it kind of clinical sounding, stuff like love, you know, love is what love is because love works. Love builds up. Love is expedient. Love moves things along, whether it's human to human love, or it's the love of one's work, or the love of excitement or adventure or something. Any kind of positive emotional alignment as a backdrop to one's life is in synchrony with the divine forward progress, you might say, the falling forward of life. And anything that is not like love, while it can have momentary sway, is going to get swept aside by the current of love because it is not expedient. See, it's like a little kid saying, well, I'm going to hold my breath till I turn blue in the face. And what happens to the little kid, and you worry about little kid, you know, if they manage to do that, which they don't, you know, but if they did, they'd pass out, and then they'd start breathing again, and everything would, it's like there's no permanence to that which is unloving. In the cosmic sense, might take a long time. We measure human history, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do something about what we perceive that's going on around us, that's unkind, that's discompassionate, that's hurtful to others. Doesn't mean that at all. It means that we've got, well, I don't know another way to put it. We've got God on our side. We've got God on our side because love is the essence of the thing. All right. Yet God is big enough to also contain that which appears to be its opposite. We believe in the healing of the sick through the power of this mind. Yeah, and let's take that with the next one. We believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind. Well, the healing of the sick and the control of conditions really have to do with our state of mind about them, our experience of things. What is the healing of the sick? I had a dear friend pass away on the 29th of December. She was a practitioner, friend of 20 years, practitioner for 14. She was our pastoral care director at Creative Life. I don't know what we're going to do without her. And I feel guilty sometimes when I think that, because no one on this earth is in more pain than her partner of decades. They've been together, I don't know how long, when I met them, which was in 98, you know, and we treated about her healing. She had health problems big time for about the last 3 years, multiple surgeries, 4 in the last week of her life on this earth, and treated about the healing of the sick and the healing of the sick and the healing of the sick. And you know what? You know what her partner thinks? So I'm free to say it because it might sound cold if she didn't. Now she's healed. Now she's healed. Now she's out of a body that she'd worn out with so much love and so much compassion. And all of us have suffered losses. And I know several of you in this class tonight have experienced loss, grievous losses recently or not recently. Okay. And death is a healing. Also, sick means more than just physical illness. You can be sick with worry. You can be sick with confusion. The healing of the sick through the power of this mind. The power of this mind is the only thing that heals, that ever heals, because the mind is not limited to just the intellect. See? And so, like, if I have a cut, you know, on my hand or something minor, I don't even notice it's there. My body is working on healing that right now, and that's mind at work. It's knowing to send, you know, what is it, vitamin K and stuff to clot the blood and other, and in fact, in the body, any of you in medicine know this, but in the body, everything mobilizes to head to a spot of trouble. It just knows how to do that. Also knows how to digest food and pump blood and do all kinds of things I don't know how to make it do. And that's all mind working. And on the control of conditions, the problematic word there for many is control. So why don't we call it something else? How about we believe in the management of conditions? We believe in the navigation through conditions rather than the control of conditions. Because you know what? I've tried to control a lot of conditions and I failed. I tried to make it rain when it didn't want to. Vicky was part of a vigil where we had that. Actually, Ruth set that up about making it rain when we had a bad drought here. I tried to make it rain when it didn't want to. I've tried to make it stop when it didn't want to. I've tried to move all kinds of things around and control conditions. And the only thing I found I could control was my experience, how I felt about them. And when I felt differently about them, they seemed to change. They either did change or they didn't bother me anymore the way they were, or something else happened. And so that's where I have to look is within myself, is to control conditions. And this is why many of us have sung for years a song called Let There Be Peace on Earth and Let It Begin With Me. Because if it doesn't begin with me, there's one place on earth where peace isn't happening, plus which it could break out everywhere and I wouldn't know it because I'm not peaceful. And again, this is not meant to hold us back from compassionate action with our fellow humans. It means to have a grounding in the experience of joy. A lot of us at my center are very involved in anti-racism work, anti-homophobia work. I know that sounds negative, but it's the clearest way to put it, where we're supporting trans rights. We live in a state that has increasingly restricted political scene around these things. I'm not here to involve you in my particular outlook or that of my center, but I want to tell you where we're at. And the challenge is with anything that you're working on, the challenge, the same as Mother Teresa had when she was working with lepers, is to not fall into the pathos of the condition. Because if you do, you lose your thread. Then it's all consuming. If Mother Teresa had ever said, "Oh my God, leprosy, what an awful disease, I might catch it too," she'd have dropped dead on the spot. Instead, you know what she said? She never saw a leper. She never saw a leper. She saw Christ. She saw Christ. Saw right past the appearance of the condition into the Christ. And this is what we're trying to do in our management of conditions. It's to say there's a place where everybody belongs, and we all have different political and economic ideas about how best to sort everything out. Well, there's a power that knows the best way. And I'm going to know that it's enacting that now through me and through political leaders and whoever else is involved in the thing. And we're starting to wind down here. We're only 3 minutes over. We believe in the eternal goodness, the eternal loving kindness, and the eternal givingness of life to all. Isn't that sweet? Yeah, that really sums it up. The eternal loving kindness. Often he didn't hyphenate that word, and if you type it out that way, it'll get a wavy red line under it. He invented a lot of words, unfoldment is another one. Have you ever typed out unfoldment? You think of it like a tablecloth. This is how we unfold, our spiritual unfoldment. First, I'm just this little square, and then, there's more of me and more of me. The eternal goodness, the eternal loving kindness, the eternal givingness of life to all. We believe in our own soul, our own spirit, and our own destiny, for we understand that the life of all is God. So we believe that we are a soul, we are spirit, we have a destiny, and our destiny, as this teaching approaches it, is self-generated. Wherever we were before here, there's no karma that can hold you back. There's no, karmic debt that you're paying off or burning off in this life. There's nothing that's not possible to you. One thing that's very fun and rewarding to do is to read the stories of people who have done absolutely remarkable things out of nowhere, overcome incredible challenges, or in some cases not, just had a whole different idea for how they wanted their life to look, and went off and succeeded in it. One of them was at the Golden Globes last night. I forget his name, but the he was a child actor in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Did you see this? And he said, when I finished that film, he said, well, that was it. You know, I knew that nothing in my life would ever be as wonderful as that experience was. And they came and got him recently to do another movie. And he now is I don't know, he's 35 or something now. And he won Best Actor for it, or Best Supporting Actor for this new role, you know. So sometimes there's a lag in time between achievements. Sometimes it's a whole new direction that you take. People give up on love. They say, well, I'm old now and I'm not attractive to people and nobody's going to want me. And suddenly they turn a corner and their eyes meet someone, you know, and there it is. And all of that is self-generated destiny. Something in them never gave up hope, never gave up holding on to that possibility that some great good could come their way. And so we are encouraged to do that as well. And so that's basically it. That takes us through it. I'm not going to share with you now, but I'll make available to you through Vicki, because we're out of time and I don't want to keep you, but there is a separate document I only recently discovered called Why We Believe. And you know who wrote it? Hazel Holmes, his wife. It was published in Science Mind magazine, I think in 1939. And it's beautiful. Why We Believe. I'm writing some stuff on it, but I'll make sure to send it to those of you. Just let Vicki know, and she can. I'll just send it to Vicki, and Vicki can forward it because she probably has all your email addresses. You know, it's just
Thank
a
you
one-page
so much.
document. Yeah, and it looks a lot like this. You know, with the. It's about. Well, it's a full page in the magazine. Okay,
you
questions, comments? Yes.
Hey, yeah, can you take us off shared screen so we can see?
Oh yeah, sure.
Lisa? Reverend Lisa?
Lisa. Alyssa is raising her hand.
Yes, please, Lisa.
Yes. Quick question. In the Science of Mind magazine this month on page 77 with Holmes' feature, the very top it says, we're modernizing the timeless works of Ernest Holmes. Beginning with this issue of this magazine, all articles and quotes from Holmes will appear with gender-neutral language, keeping the meaning and intent intact. I've seen some discrepancies with that, but my question to you is, do you think they should do that to the belief, what we believe?
Yeah, and I think they really have.
I was not aware.
Because he said, let me give you an example here.
My
Okay.
concern is that it would lose the consciousness, the higher consciousness, or the way it was stated. That was my concern.
In the line, okay, we believe in the direct revelation of truth through the intuitive and spiritual nature of each person. That used to be man. We
Okay.
believe in the intuitive spiritual nature of man, and that any man may become a revealer of truth who lives in close contact with the indwelling God. Today, that's very jarring to people, man. It's jarring to men as well as to women. It's mostly jarring to women, but it's jarring to men too, because it's like, no, I want this, you know, it's just, it doesn't feel right. It's tricky. I curate the daily guides every October, which are all by Ernest Holmes. And my challenge to this point, because I've not made them gender neutral, on instructions from Holly, my editor, she said, let's leave those alone. And that may change in the, you know, later this year, but my challenge has been to find a passage that doesn't mention Jesus. Because, you know, if you read Holmes, every fourth page has Jesus on it. And I don't want to limit what he's saying to the people who feel kindly about Jesus. So it's been tricky. Now my job gets harder, but that's all right. It's, you know, it's good. I think it's time that we did this. And because more and more people, as generations, you know, our generation, you and I appear to be of the same generation. You know, our generation was the first really that kind of considered that idea, and it was well, it was a novel approach, you know. But as the younger people are coming along, they're expecting that, and they're eventually going to expect gender neutral pronouns as a
Yeah.
standardized, which I've been working into the text. You know, the old he she
Mhm.
thing is it's unwieldy and it's inaccurate.
Well, what about the I? In other words, it says we believe. Should it say I believe?
Well, it could, and it puts it, you know, in the individual voice, and we wouldn't get yelled at for it being a creed, you know.
Thinking about
Yeah.
it.
I think why they're doing it in the magazine is to somebody picks this thing up at Barnes and Noble. You want to know, who are these people? What do they stand for?
Right.
I'll tell you a true story real quick. This used to be available through our home office in calligraphy on lambskin or the equivalent. I mean, beautiful. Now it was parchment paper, but it was really thick, pebbled parchment paper in calligraphy, illuminated around the edges in gold. Okay. And they sold this for $50 or something 35 years ago. I bought one and took it to a local framer here in my community. Dropped it off, paid a fortune to have this thing matted and framed and all of this. Guy said, come back in 2 weeks. I came back in 2 weeks, and the owner of the shop brought it out to me. And he said, what is this? I told him, my church. He said, I had never seen anything so beautiful. He said, this is exactly what I believe. It's exactly what I believe. The guy was Jewish. And he never joined creative life. He never, you know, took classes or any of this kind of thing. But he became a friend and an ally in the community. And somebody, I did a lot of framing work over the years, and he also sold art and stuff like that, you know. And it made me realize that if you were to take this thing out without any kind of
Right.
run up, you know, about we have an organization and we want you to join and we want you to spend your life with us and blah, blah, blah. But you just took this thing out and just handed it to people, said, here, have a nice day. Maybe not even put our name on it.
Right.
Just here, have a
Yes.
nice day. They
Yes.
look at this and think, God, you know, I feel better about myself because of this. Who knows, you know?
Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. And I missed that. I need to talk to Holly about that because I missed that line in the current magazine. That was a big conversation that I had with David Goldberg when he was there back in the day about, I said, look, what do you want me to do? Because I want to be consistent with the other writers for the magazine and save you some time editing, you know. And at that time, there wasn't a clear answer, clear path forward, because there is a sense of wanting to venerate the work of Ernest. But, you know, the book that Ernest considered the holiest book on the planet is the Judeo-Christian Bible. You know this from reading him. He maintained the Bible was like, as Troward did too, the Bible was this. And how many hands has that passed through? And how many times has that been tweaked? And you'll find versions of it now that you cannot think, I wouldn't know I'm reading the same thing, you know, because it's the new standard modernized gospel of what's happening now. And I was raised with the King James, and this is, what is this, you know? And so if you can do that to that book and still presumably have the core meaning of it communicated, why not, you know, be able to do it to Holmes? And you know who could stand a good editing is Emma Curtis Hopkins, because she is fierce. She is like, what? With these references, the education that these people got in those days, you know? I remember reading, I'm keeping you in overtime here. I remember reading about in a one-room schoolhouse, I think here in Texas, in 1880, let's say, here's what the students needed to know to graduate 6th grade. Have you ever seen these things? And I looked at it, I'm like, my God. I mean, the math, the sciences that existed in the 1880s, the geography, the classics. Wow. Yeah, it's something else. Okay, anybody else have a question or comment or anything? Hey, Carol, good to see you. Glad you made it.
Hey, hey Jesse, it's Tammy. I just want to say hi.
Hey, Tammy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm so grateful to see your wonderful face, and thank you so much for covering this again. I remember you had done this in the past,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
just one
you
of
were
those
there.
things you can just keep getting layers and levels from. So thank you so much for coming.
You are so welcome. It's been my pleasure. Somebody just put, is there anything in the chat I should read? Somebody just asked, when is the essential Ernest Holmes being taught? They tell me summer, so I'm thinking June.
Will you be teaching it?
Yeah, for
Okay.
CSL online. That's why they're telling me. Um, we just had one in, when was it, October?
Was it Katrina that asked that?
Anyone else?
So we have a pregnant pause here. Any burning desires?
Ask Jesse. Just like the magazine.
What's it saying? We have another thank you
Thank you from Reverend Guy.
from
Let me-
Reverend Catherine.
I read the chat here. Let me copy that. Yeah, I'll send absolutely the Hazel piece. You know where I found that was in this book. Have you seen this book? Can you read that?
Courage, conviction, consciousness.
Courage,
Okay.
conviction, and consciousness.
Yeah. 365 days of inspiration from the women of New Thought. I found this at Mile High in Denver when I was teaching there in January of 2020, teaching historical foundations in New Thought. And I mentioned something about the women founders of New Thought, and there was a murmur in the group. It was a large group, and somebody ran up and said, have you seen this? And I said, no, I hadn't. And it had apparently just been published. So I snagged a copy of it since. This is, I know you can't read this, but this is a list of who all is included. And what I love about the list is they're not all like way in the distant past. There are some, and there's some obscure ones that are in the distant past. One of whom, did she make the list? Just a minute. No. Look up sometime Frances Lord. That's Frances with an E. She was one of Emma Curtis Hopkins' many students in Chicago who took New Thought back to the UK. But also in here is Peggy Bassett.
Oh, yeah.
And also in here is Betty Jean House. And also in here is, let's see, Mary Tumpkins. She was an RSI minister relatively recently. Jane Yarnall. I know some of these names. Lillian DeWaters, who's old time, but Ruth Wilkerson lost her mind over her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Agnes Gaylor. Agnes Gaylor was a divine science minister in Seattle who ordained Ernest Holmes when he decided that he wanted to become a minister. So anyhow, they brought me this. And so I go through here looking for material all the time for talks. And the daily readings look like daily readings as in Science Mind. There's a little, a little affirmation at the bottom and a quote at the top. And I'm going through here. I do standalone series on women in New Thought, as well as topical series involving the teachings of women in New Thought. And I run across this Hazel Holmes piece. Oh, cool, it's Hazel. And I start to read it. I'm like, whoa. So you're going to love it. So then I called Holly at the magazine, and she sent me the PDF of the page it appeared on when it was first published. And this man found it. This Reverend Dr. C. William Mercer, who lives in the Carolinas. And I'm reaching out to him to get more information on who he is. It's on my list to do. Anyway, thank you all so much for your kind attention. If you're interested in the Essential Ernest Holmes class, If you've not had it, it's, I think, $295. And if you have had it, there's an audit fee that they ask that's collected through our home office. And Vicki can tell you when it is, or you can go to our Facebook page at Creative Life Spiritual Center, or you can go to the CSL.org website and click on spiritual development classes, and there's a pull down thing and a screen and so forth. And the next thing I'll be doing is publicly out in the world, outside my own center, is on, this might interest you actually. It's open to practitioners and people who teach science of mind, which I don't know why that wouldn't be a practitioner. I guess there are places where there aren't practitioners and they teach science of mind. I don't make the rules. I just, break them. But this is run through CSL Professional Development. It's going to be at 11 a.m. Central Time on Wednesday, February 1st. Central Time, 11 a.m. You're Eastern Kentucky. Well,
Yes.
You're all over the map, so you can figure it out. Central Time, 11 a.m. Central Time, and it's on the history of spiritual mind treatment.
Oh,
And this was driven by a conversation some of us had who when there were two religious science organizations, United and RSI. United had 5-step treatment, RSI had 7-step treatment. And so everybody's interested to know about the 2 extra steps, or why don't we have them, or how all this came to be. So it's about an hour long, and it's free. It's free of charge, because it's meant to give teachers more information to go teach with.
you got that down?
So
And where do we find the link for that, Jesse?
that'll be on CSL.org, professional development. I don't know
Thank
if
you
it's
so
up
much.
yet. They sent me the draft of the ad. I think it'll also be in the February magazine, which I haven't looked in yet, just came in. Or you can email Reverend Nicole Mergis at nmergis@csl.org. I don't have the link yet, or I'd send it to you.
Oh, that's okay. I got all that down.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds fabulous. This has been just so rich. Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you so much. And it's so great to see all of you, meet the new ones, and see old friends.
Oh.
And Bob Gale, thank you so much for being here. This is Big Guy. We had a lot of adventures together.
So let us just say good night, everybody. Good night, John Boy.
Thank you so much.